Hello, everybody. Just checking that you can see my screen, to go. You can hear me. Okay, so welcome to Crunch 3.3. Really good to have you all here. Just to let you know that throughout you can ask questions and we'll be able to see those and register what's coming in. Sharing my screen with you now. The question we're asking ourselves is purpose beyond profit for a healthier ad industry, ? So we've spoken to many industry leaders and have had a very strong response to the question. So I'll just set the scene of what we've discovered and how that's driven today's agenda. First of all, let's look at some indicators around purpose beyond profit. So this is a study from August 2019 from the Harvard Business Review. 181 company CEOs representing over 30% of the US stock market capitalization took part and signed up to the findings in an open letter from the US Business Roundtable. And better, I just quote some of that to you rather than paraphrase. So the first quote is, in our data, we find that companies with high levels of purpose outperform the market by 5 to 7% per year, on par with companies with best-in-class governance and innovative capabilities. They also grow faster and have higher profitability. And what I'd personally add here is that it's been quite clear in the research we've done as the AOP that to some the word purpose seems to indicate something idealistic, probably unrealistic in its approach to business that's not about the pursuit of profit. So I just want to add another quote here. And this is from Lawrence Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock. So BlackRock is the world's largest asset manager with $7.4 trillion in assets under management at the end of 2019. And he says it like it is there. Purpose is not the sole pursuit of profits, but the animating force for achieving them. I won't read the rest, just to say that they are inextricably linked. So that is the point that we're trying to set up in this discussion, that purpose beyond profit drives business success. Now, we also know from our research that senior agency leaders and the brands, and especially the global brands that they're working with, are discovering that brand equity and the effectiveness of advertising are diminishing, and that they're exploring purpose beyond profit at the center of their marketing and advertising investments as an answer to this, how they can increase their relevance in the world going forward. Agencies responding in a number of ways. We've spoken to them, really super interesting stuff going on. So Mindshare are delivering sustainability proposals alongside each of their conventional proposals that go to a client. Havas, who've always pursued a position of media with meaning, have actually just launched, I'll just jump to the slide, really super interesting piece here. They've launched a new private marketplace in the US made up of Black, Hispanic and LGBTQ owned media partners, which is expected to roll out across the world. And so that's super interesting. And actually there's loads more examples, some of which you'll see today, where the outcome is, if you are a publisher that is creating content for these communities, or if your ad sales facilitates investment with purpose, you'll be building a better long-term business outlook, as well as actually creating short-term gains. The two things are massively compatible there. And we've seen examples from the Evening Standard, The Guardian, that confirm these. You'll see some more in the presentation. And we see also, actually interestingly, the success of ethical investment tools and formats like GiveWith and GoodLoop, both of whom are well worth seeking out, by the way. And so we make point 2, which is that basically ethical ad investment actually seems to be a thing in the ad industry. So just want to jump to the final point in the agenda. All of these things we've talked about here were well underway before COVID-19, but now we're living through what looks like an extensive cultural change, actually. And we're asking, has the impact of COVID-19 and the following Black Lives Matter movement changed the way that people, brands and businesses interact with each other forever? I only feel that that's true for us population, and we're just trying to map some of the dimensions of that today, actually. And we've got a great team of experts to do that, so I won't keep you myself. I'll just jump to the agenda. So we have presentations, 15 minutes each, 5 for questions. Please do ask questions. We have Amir Malik first from Accenture presenting. Then we have Caroline Forbes and Louise Stubbins from Clear Channel, Ed Latham from Pucker. Then we'll jump to a panel. Amy Williams from Goodloop will moderate. We have Chris Kenner from Brand Advance, Laura Wade from Essence, and Dino Meisland from the Barbershop there. I'm not going to spend a long time introducing those people, because actually the quality of what they're going to tell you will speak for itself. And I just wanted to jump to the questions actually that we're asking. So the questions are, we've asked everyone the same kind of questions, and they'll all bring their own slant to it. But really it's this, what is the impact on the CMO, the agency, and media? Next, tell us a little bit more about what's going on with this cultural change, if there is one. What is it? And then what are the long and short-term opportunities? Are they, really, is there short-term opportunity in this? It looks like there is. And the big question for the whole thing, really, do we need to do this? Or does this lead us in some extent or another to create a healthier ad industry? And finally, the usual question, what should publishers, AOP and the industry do about it? So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Amir from Accenture. Really looking forward to this. Thanks very much, everybody. Please do ask questions. So we're just waiting a sec while Amir shares his screen with us. Here we go.
There we go. Hello, guys. Are you able to see me and hear me?
Yep. Yeah, got you.
Okay, good morning all. Hi, so I'm really glad to be able to present today. This is my first sort of rodeo in a Zoom presentation. I've refused to do it thus far, but this was such an important topic. I thought it was worth doing. I'm nervous, more nervous than I'd be on stage, to be honest. The guys at AOP know that as well. So I've been, if I connection breaks, I've got a backup as well. So shifting consumerism and the search for purpose in profit as well. So if we go to the next slide, that'd be great. So today's consumers, are exhibiting traits which I think were captured quite well by Malcolm Gladwell in his book Tipping Point. This is the idea that agendas and public opinion go through a sequence and reach a point where it grabs global mass attention, mass adoption, and then reaches the tipping point. And Black Lives Matter is a really good example of one of those events. Generally, what we're seeing is that people and consumers are concerned with worldwide political and social uncertainty, the mounting environmental pressures that we face as well in our civilization, and the power shift between humans and corporates. These three areas in particular are themes that consumers are becoming more involved with and having implications on their business interactions. Go to the next slide. So we conduct what is called a global pulse survey. It's about 250,000 people. It's very well regarded, especially in America. And we gather feedback around big themes that affect consumers and sort of public perception around business and corporations. And some of the stats that we found clearly indicate that there is a relationship between a business, the set of ethics that a business publicizes about itself and the consumer interpretation of those ethics. And that's revealed through the leaders of those business, the statements publicly made by those business, and the marketing of those businesses, right? And so if you just take the middle stat, so 55% believe individual protest action can make a difference in how brands behave. So that's first of all this idea that people are discovering their power and how they can influence businesses. And Doc Searls, with his VRM or vendor relationship management theory, I think formulated in Harvard, has seen that this trend is just being realized more and more. People can influence the way businesses try to build and present their products and even their marketing and their stances. 37% of people have stopped doing business with a brand when they feel that its word or actions don't reflect their own personal persuasion or their own opinions, and probably their own ethics as well. And we'll see some examples of that. If we go to the next slide. There's a concept called the Maslow theory, which anyone who's ever done an MBA will probably hear about, or done a business degree. And it's this hierarchy of 5 states that people traverse. And if you look at the top, when things are going well, you're in a peaceful, stable society. You're looking for, you're focused on, your self-actualization, your self-esteem. You're thinking about how you are, really going to grow personally, etc. But in situations like COVID, you move down the hierarchy. Society does, and people are looking for safety and security, their immediate physiological needs, and love and belonging, sort of across both spectrums. In that time, it's important that brands resonate with these human needs, and this structure gives us a nice way to sort of approach the content and the purpose that CMOs really want to raise through their marketing agendas. And equally, we're seeing businesses take risks around sort of the stances that they take, especially in the sports industry, with Adidas, etc., to really reflect these principles. And equally, you'd even look at the style of adverts. So when COVID hit, there was like a somber music, scenes of people working around hospitals, traveling late at night, type of style of advert that was made by many brands. Now, it's funny that there's so many of them that they cloned each other among different creative agencies, sort of predictably, but it's reflecting this idea that people are a bit more sensitive, that they need a bit more sort of like tender care during this time. And the adverts were reflecting that whole trend. And there's an interesting study online about, it took like 10 of them that all look the same from 10 different businesses. But it's obvious that brands want to resonate with people. So discovering what those themes are is really important. We go to the next slide. So when it comes to media and the ad industry, I think this is really important and relevant to us. We can delve right into that. And I think it's of particular interest to media agencies, to publishers themselves. And I think that there has been a history of ethics in advertising, if we go to the next slide, which has been long sort of supported and obvious to us ourselves, right? So if you look at Michael Jordan, this is probably the most famous a use of an influencer, right? So a brand wrapping themselves around a hero like Nike, or Colin Kaepernick, who's done the Bend the Knee, and all the brands sort of embraced that and ran campaigns around that. But really with Jordan, you've seen his impact on Nike by being, the greatest basketball player of all time, Nike grabbing that wave and driving it. Equally, that can go wrong, right? So, sponsorship at a personal level, around athletes in particular, or influencers, can take a turn for the worse. For example, when influencers or athletes get convicted of, heinous crimes, even sometimes when they're accused of crimes, right, and it's not proven, the sensitivity around that forces brands to react, and they withhold their spend straight away because they don't want to be killed by association, as you could obviously predict. And I think, I won't go through examples of people that, have been accused and or being convicted, but this is an obvious one, which is quite overt around where the advertising and the marketing budget needs to be wrapped around ethics. Equally, if you look at sort of the behavior of sort of the executive at businesses as well, that can have an impact on their brand, which results in poor outcomes, right? The CEO, Bob Parsons, was filmed himself elephant hunting in 2011, and just was really proud of it. And he ran a big famous unicorn sort of digital business, GoDaddy, he's no longer the CEO, but you know, there was a public outcry towards his behavior. Again, on the right, you know, Waitrose, you know, their editor, John Brown, he published what he called a joke about killing vegans one by one. Whether you think he was serious or not, right? And what my opinion is, it doesn't matter. What it demonstrates is that you know, he effectively was removed from his job. You know, people were calling for him to be fired, and somebody in a business with the sort of brand reputation of Waitrose / John Lewis, you know, they couldn't take any risks with that sort of content being publicized and associated with their brand. So there is massive sensitivity, whether it's right or wrong, whether intellectually you could rationalize that he was joking or not, around, you know, being associated with unfriendly, unpopular themes and content and opinions that conflict with the general masses. And that in itself demonstrates that you need to sort of be cognizant of the purpose around your brand, the affiliations you have, and also how you're marketing yourselves as well. If we go to the next slide. So ethics in advertising isn't really new, but in digital advertising and ad tech, it's a real problem. So most publishers and platforms run the same formula, which is really how they should run, which is about, as soon as you're in the app or on the site or reading, you know, they are working on the attention economy. So it is useful for them to retain as much of your attention as possible. Now, that has its complications, but through that attention, which will come back to the complications, they then start to monetize their business, right? And this is when it's free content or free use of platforms. You are generating revenue by the page views, by the impressions, by the time on site or time on platform from those consumers. It's really important for publishers, right? And it's important because advertisers need to find means to deliver their messages and their communications out to prospect clients, existing clients for retargeting, et cetera, et cetera. But what are the complications? So the complications in the attention economy really are we're finding around content. So if, for instance, what Cambridge Analytica has demonstrated to us is that you can use content to influence public opinion. The government have just published, the House of Lords have published a document really outlining that we are underestimating the power of digital media in terms of how it influences personal opinion at an individual consumer level. And therefore, if you're somebody that's sort of contemplating far-right views, once you're digesting articles, the recommendation algorithms are algorithmically sending you more content, more right-wing content, which actually is leading to your radicalization from any persuasion, right? From jihadi videos to, you know, just anti-immigrant views, anti-gay, lesbian views. And that is really, you know, a phenomenon that is affecting the content landscape of the internet. When you add the advertising economy, basically brands and CMOs are inadvertently funding these content vehicles. And that is a big risk for them, right? And they're becoming more conscious of it. So basically the ad tech evolution has outpaced the ethics of advertising in the digital ecosystem. So if we look at the ethical economy, there's really only performance variables around digital marketing, right? There's like, even from a brand awareness, how many clicks, what was the viewability, what was the conversion rate? There isn't an ethical variable yet, right? There's a contextual words, but it's a very blunt and binary, right? If the word black appears there or the word Muslim appears there, you know, don't advertise, but it could be a positive article. It could be a well-intentioned piece of editorial content. So that harms some of our publishers. Equally, it's not really getting to the nub of it, which is what are the authority voices, right? Which we'll come on to. If we go to the next slide. So one of the ventures that I'm working on is the Conscious Advertising Network. And we've really tried to make sort of brands be aware of the power of their ad dollars the United Nations has joined us in this effort, and has actually probably legitimized us to a great extent. We joined the UN Forum for Human Rights, and we've been doing lots of work with the UN in terms of trying to consolidate a point of view, because I can tell you at a global level, there's rising concern around how the internet is affecting the mentality of our societies. And I think that is why we come up with these principles, just taking a view of them that think about like, children's well-being, right? So how is advertising targeting children viewers? Because as far as a computer or an algorithm is concerned, it just sees data like device IDs, cookie IDs now, but if we substitute with a new ID, it's not necessarily understanding, is this a child behind that computer or behind that phone, borrowing their mum's phone or sitting on the family PC? And therefore, is the appropriate content, the appropriate ads as well being shown at the right time? So, you know, do you see suddenly a horror movie trailer watching a video around, I don't know, a kids event or a football team scoring a goal, right? But there could be a child behind that. So these are complex issues which we're trying to work through, right? There's no easy fix, but CAN is raising awareness around that. Also, you know, the rise of hate speech online and the popularity of it, unfortunately, right? Which is generating in itself ad revenues for those sort of, those nefarious sort of leaders, right? That publish that content and then want to monetize their content as well as a revenue stream for their hate sort of organizations. And that spans across all spectrums. So I think that with the ethics question, it's important that, you know, we rally behind people like CAN, even AOP doing an event like this is super important to bring that awareness up. If we go to the next slide. And what does this tell us, right? So on that point of authority voices, the Milgram experiment, which was conducted at Yale, basically took a professor who looked really legitimate, like, and very authoritative, and obviously, you know, to to a general person, you would take them as an expert in their field. And basically, he took a bunch of people for a social experiment where he said, okay, come in, we're going to invite you to take part in this experiment, we're going to pay you, etc. But we want to just do some research around how, you know, a situation, and it was a fabricated situation. And he asked the people, as a professor, right, you know, backed with a very authoritative university logo, to electrocute people at various voltages. And almost everybody exclusively went to the max voltage, listening to the professor to electrocute somebody. And this tells us something about human nature, which is that if I see something on a very sort of shady looking website, crappy layout, you know, very amateur looking, funny news, excellentnews.com. I hope that site doesn't exist, right? But imagine if something along those lines, you know, I'm very quickly going to filter that as probably fake news, or you know, not to use one of the slogans, but something that I can't really trust. Or if I, you know, for example, if you drink milk, right, it takes 5 years off your life, and you say, oh God, I'm going to stop buying milk now, for instance. Okay, well, I need to validate that. The second I see that, though, through an authoritative voice, like a mainstream publisher, etc., I suddenly will be influenced by what I'm reading. And therefore, there's a responsibility around that content production. And we do know that, you know, user-generated content has, you know, is not being regulated properly at the moment. Equally, there is a real value in the open economy of content, I think, and that's important, that, you know, publishers and creatives are being born every day in different platforms. But we need to understand that the advertising dollars really needs to flow through validated content, right? Authoritative content, you know, evidence-based positions and opinions, right? And we see that how, you know, misnomers around just slight data points can sway public opinion, right? If everybody publishes that there'll be 350 million pounds going into the NHS every week if we did Brexit, right? People believed that and voted off of that. That was a variable and lever for voting. Was it accurate, or we don't know, But the second it went into the mainstream, titles as a proven point, through the voices of authoritative figures, it influenced our voting outcomes. So we need to think about how content is really being powered, to influence people, and equally how advertising is actually the lifeblood and fuel for that to exist. So it's almost like there will be this karmic closed loop around advertising that we need to be aware of, that if we irresponsibly invest ad dollars, we could be giving power to the wrong opinions, the wrong points of views. And we need to ensure that we're trusting expert voices, right? Voices that have the right governance around them as well, which is important for publishers and should be something featuring in their sales collateral more and more, I think. If you go to the next slide. Or is that me done? I think that might be done, maybe done actually. Yeah, that's a completed deck. So I hope, yeah.
So I have a question for you, and it's this. And I think there's so much important content in what you were showing us, and maybe one of the key points there was about a KPI for the ethical ad economy. Now I know it's difficult to do that without becoming, I guess, thought police, but we definitely, in the research that we've done, we've seen agencies are pursuing these things anyway, and so they're starting to look at not just the quality of the environment. So for instance, the marketplace that was created by Havas is already, if you like, putting some kind of ethical measure on the content that they've created there. Have you seen any conversations yet on what those KPIs might be? Anyone wants to get around the table talking about it?
Yeah, so great to hear from others as well. Two things I'd say in answer to that. Firstly, one of the things that has been important about Cannes is about devising what those principles might be. So there are sort of universal truths that people agree upon, which is children's well-being, right? Protecting our children. That in itself is influencing how some of the platforms are requiring people that upload, or video creators, to flag, is their content children safe or not, in the initial upload of the video. So usually it'd be later on that you edited it, but now they've brought that forward. There are other ones like around public opinion, personal political allegiances, which are much more difficult to navigate. But let's start with the basics. So for me, you can do sort of fix the basic KPIs, right? Children safe content, non-racist content. I've met, very senior figures who sort of said, well, actually, I will advertise on sort of InfoWars, right? I will advertise on, right-wing websites, because people are reading that content who are also my customers. But, at what cost, right? And I've had that debate. I'd say 99 out of 100 marketeers I've ever met want to not advertise on those sites and not advertise on those content. So some of it needs to be driven by the CMOs as well. And it might need to be opt-in as well. So there'd be like, fix the basics, children's well-being, and then there'll be opt-in around, you don't want to be on homophobic sites or anti-Semitic sites or Islamophobic sites. You want to avoid that content. And I think you'll find that the vast majority of marketers would opt out if they could, rather than their ad dollars funding those sorts of businesses.
Yeah, I think the key there is that it's just not that easy to do it sometimes, right? So it should be really simple to choose the content positively that you go into, but also to choose the content that you don't want to be in. And I think that's something that the industry needs to make easier. So hopefully we'll move towards that and work together on that. So I'd just like to thank you for that, Amir. We've got a packed agenda, so we'll move on to the next presentation, which is from Clear Channel. We have Caroline Forbes and Louise Stubbings. Anybody with any questions, please fire away. I know there's a lot of content in here, but anyway, thank you again, Amir. Welcome, Louise and Caroline.
Thank you, Dilip. I'll just share my screen. with me. Not showing presentation.
So I should just say,
trying to share my screen, but I can't find the deck, which is helpful.
So I'm going to do a little preamble while you're looking at that. So what I should say actually is that a bunch of people we've talked to, so like, why isn't a publisher presenting at this juncture? And we've talked to lots of publishers, we've talked to Guardian, ESI, lots of local news publishers, really interesting purpose around what they're doing. But what you're going to find with Clear Channel is just some really interesting discovery of meaning and purpose in the business, how that's affected their interactions with agencies and brands in the short and the long term, and how they've consistently followed that idea through, and how it's developed and led a lot of things they've done. So it's super interesting, an example that's super relevant to any of us. So fire away, Louise.
Thank you. Can you see my screen now?
Yep.
We're good. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting us on this call. We really appreciate it. You're right, we're not publishers. We're an outdoor business that doesn't produce our own content, but as a trusted media, the content that we put on our screens is incredibly important, and it's our name on the advertising hoardings. So if anything goes up there that people disagree with, we're the ones that they come to and talk to. So it's incredibly important that we take responsibility for the content that goes up on them. And in current situations, as Dilip was saying about the cultural shift, it's more important than ever. We have a vision that we set about 5 years ago now for creating the future of media. I think now more than ever, that's incredibly important. As you guys will know as well as we do, we don't know what the future of our channel is going to look like after all of this time, and what our audiences are going to be demanding from us. So we're excited and optimistic about what that looks like, given what we're going to talk through now. But it has been a very trying time from an outdoor perspective in particular. Obviously, when you're trying to talk about outdoor advertising when everyone's being told to stay indoors, it's quite a challenging time for us. So I'm going to start with talking about the fact that about 2 or 3 years ago, our chairman put a new value for us, a fairness value in place globally across all our business units. And embedding that into the business as a key value had a massive effect on empowering everyone in each business unit to do more with that value and interpret what that meant for them individually. For us, from a UK perspective, we translated that as creating a platform for brands and a platform for good. So as an infrastructure business, we provide bus shelters for local communities. Those bus shelters are only able to be produced and maintained and cleaned as a result of the advertising on them. So our purpose on that side of things from an infrastructure perspective is intrinsically linked to our profit. One does not exist without the other. But we wanted to be more than that. We wanted to give back to the communities that we exist in. That's incredibly important to us, that we're part of that community, and as a result have a responsibility to make things better for them, whether that's through the advertising that we put on the screens or through the infrastructure that we provide. And we're also committed to building the best possible platform for brands to advertise on. So those two start becoming our purpose, and everything that we do is geared around either being a platform for brands or a platform for good. And when you look back from an outdoor perspective, it actually always has been a platform for good. So its purpose has always been to improve things for people. So we did some investigative work a few years ago and actually found that 50% of all outdoor revenue is invested back into public services, which is huge. It's the only business model in media that works in that way. Everything goes back to then fund those local services. So it's a virtuous circle where we do the cleaning and maintenance. We look after those bus shelters. We put more investment into them to improve them, to make them better, which then in turn provides a better platform for brands to advertise on. So you can see that the two for us are always together in terms of the giving back side of things, but we as Clear Channel wanted to do more on top of that. So using that platform for good as the real foundation for our driving purpose, we started looking at what actually that means for us from a UK perspective, and how can we really find what we want to be doing and discover what we're about and promote that externally to clients. Now, what I think is the key point about this, and why it links so perfectly with everything you'll learn about today, is that everything that we do, we're not doing in order to get advertising revenue alongside it. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do. It will cost us money to do it. So it would be cheaper for us not to do any of these initiatives that I'm talking about, but because we feel intrinsically they're the right things to do and they're beneficial to society, we do them. So we are in the process of putting in bus shelters that are made from recycled materials, that have living roofs on top of them, that have solar panels in them. We have replaced all of our classic paper billboards. All the lighting in those is now LED lighting, which means that we're taking much less energy off the grid. Our ultimate aim is to come off the grid entirely if we can. We're working with councils across the country to plant edible playgrounds for children in children's schools. So there's research showing that if children learn how to grow their own fruit and vegetables, they're healthier. There's less chance of obesity and malnutrition, which are big issues in across the country. So that's a key part of our thinking, is how we can make things better. We plant trees. So we own a phone box business, and for every phone box that we either upgrade or remove, we plant a tree, and these are proper trees, not saplings, in order to help with CO2 emissions. And then we're also partnering with Central St Martin's and their design course. We've signed a 5-year contract with them to look at what the future of the high street could look like. So what could bus shelters in the future look like? Again, with the aim of providing a better infrastructure and a better service for the communities that we exist in. So that's more, I guess, from our infrastructure side of things, what we're doing. But the fairness pillar for us really started our people thinking about what they could do, what this platform for good in particular means to them, and how they could get involved. So from finding our purpose, we started empowering other people to find theirs within our business. Pride is one that a few people in the business are really, really committed to, but there wasn't really an outdoor outlet for it. So about three years ago. So a couple of guys on my team took it upon themselves to think about what they wanted Pride to look like for us as a business, and for them as a business. And we started, we worked with Spotify and created a playlist to surround the route in London so that people could download that song or that playlist onto their phones when they're actually on the Pride route. So that was the first year that we did, which was great. It was a lovely indication of what we wanted to do for Pride. Last year it got bigger. We wrapped our building. We did a number of big lots of activity around different countries across our business units. So with a yes message for Pride, showing support with yes in different languages across different markets that it was displaying in. This year there was a big intention to take it even further and get people within the business to display their love of Pride across every business market that we have globally. Fortunately, because of coronavirus, that wasn't able to happen. So a lot of the team went on furlough, but someone else then picked it up in the business, which I think is really indicative of the empowerment that we've now given to everyone to go, actually, this belongs to you, anyone can run with this. And Mediacom came to us with an idea because of what we've done previously or previous years. They came to us to support Pride Inside, which was a grassroots movement from the LGBTQ plus community of 120 publishers, photographers and contributors, with a really beautiful campaign to say we might not be able to get outside, but we're still celebrating Pride Inside, which you can see that picture top right. And I'll hand over to Caroline now to take you through our other initiatives.
Hi everyone, Caroline Forbes, Specialist Partner at Clear Channel. Lou, just give me a thumbs up that you can hear me okay, because you know I've had a few technical difficulties this morning. Okay guys, so I'm going to talk you through our partnership with 56 Black Men. And I can talk about this from a personal perspective because it was myself that brought it to Clear Channel for us to run with. And I'm going to tell you a really brief story about our campaign with 56, because I think it's all about kind of what Lou has kind of been talking about in the last few slides in terms of that empowerment piece and driving that purpose for individuals within the business. So a couple of years ago, well, it was last year, April, I saw a campaign on the BBC News website for Cephas Williams, or 56 Black Men. And the first thing that struck me about that campaign was that, one, that the creative was incredibly powerful, and two, the message was very pertinent and resonated with me. There was a lot of stuff that was going on in the news at that time around knife crime, and a lot of negative associations of the black male experience in the UK. And this was the first article that I'd seen that talked about black men in a positive light. And so being a black woman with a black son growing up in London, I wanted him to actually be able to leave the safety of his home and his community and see some positive news about what he is to become. And so I immediately sent an email to my MD and my HR director, and they both said, well, it took my MD actually a couple of weeks to come back to me. And the reason why I'm letting you guys know that is because at the time he was busy kind of leading the business from a commercial perspective and had a lot on his plate. But actually, after 2 weeks of me kind of being a bit persistent, he said, Caroline, run with it. And so I did. And we asked Cephas Williams into the business. We talked. I basically said to him, look, we want to do this for you. You don't have to. This is your choice, but we would love to support you and send and put this message on screens up and down the country, into the heart of communities. And he said yes, and we ran that for 3 weeks. And what that enabled us to do was start a conversation about race at Clear Channel, and we hadn't done that before. And it was more than just the posters with this campaign. We asked Cephas to come into our business to talk to our team, and you'll see a nice smiley picture at the end of this presentation. But he came into our business to talk to our team about why this campaign was so important. And I think actually this campaign, alongside the Pride campaign, set the blueprint for how we were then wanting to work with our partners going forward. Excuse me. Next slide, please, Lou. And so from empowering individuals to using our platform for good, I talked about us kind of using our platform for our own individual purpose and kind of championing causes that are important to us. But back to us being a community notice board is definitely came to the fore for us during the COVID pandemic. We essentially turned off platform for good. Brands didn't know what to say, they didn't know how to say it, they did not want to be they did not want to be in the public consciousness at that time. And so what was important was us to try and kind of keep people connected using our screens by putting out messages of hope and support for our local heroes, for example, the NHS, and also the likes of, I'm going to pick out Paddy Power. And the reason why I pick out Paddy Power is because Paddy Power is a brand actually that predominantly uses our in-bar network, so socialite screens. And what they could have done, like a lot of brands, is turn off their advertising and say, I don't want to run right now, I want to defer my campaign. But what Paddy Power actually done was take their purpose, their tongue-in-cheek, kind of cheeky, creative and tone, and used it for good, and ran messages of support for the NHS. So you can see in the top right hand corner, you can see give our NHS better odds, and that was a great campaign. The other campaign that I'm going to point out that we were able to run is after the horrific killing of George Floyd, because we had that partnership with Cephas Williams running across all of 2019, we were now in a position to be able to authentically run content in support of Black Lives Matter, because we had already started that conversation. I think it would have been difficult for us to do that if we didn't already have that partnership in place and that legacy, and somebody who could authentically bring content to our screens that talked about race and talked about the response to that tragic incident. Next slide, please, Lou. And so we've kind of taken you on a bit of a journey from kind of empowering our people to using our platform for good. And this kind of takes it one step further. So Business as Unusual was the brainchild of someone called Mike, who sits in our comms team. And essentially, what we recognised was that our neighbourhood businesses up and down the country were suffering, particularly obviously during the COVID period. And, you know, about how were we going to support local businesses getting back to business. So we came up with this initiative where we were going to support over 250 local businesses to run free advertising across our screens. We were going to support them with creative and help them get their copy ready to go on our screens. And what that meant was, for local businesses who wouldn't ordinarily have that platform, we were able to display their messages of opening times, when they were back open, and give that support back to the local high street in a way that we've never done before. So it's not just about kind of do-good organisations or charities that need our support. We recognised in this moment that our local high streets and local businesses, the economy at large, needed our support too. So we lended our screens to that cause. Next slide, please, Lou. So how are we working with agencies? So I think probably the biggest shift that we have seen over the last 18 months is that we have become one of the go-to outdoor media owners to talk about or to try and run campaigns across sustainability causes or charitable causes. We've become trusted advisors. You'll see in the top right hand corner a campaign that we ran with Outsmart, and that was basically this is an industry collective campaign in response to the COVID crisis, us saying thank you to the NHS workers. We ran that across our screens in conjunction with all of the other media owners, outdoor media owners in the UK. We take a consultative approach to our relationship with agencies now, in that we have now got a bank of campaigns and types of campaigns that we've worked with and brought to life, and so we can talk quite confidently about kind of what are some of the best ways in which we can bring their own ideas to life. And long-term partnerships. Sorry, just to go back actually on Emily's Crisp, because this is a really good example of us taking a consultative approach. So Emily's Crisp, you'll see the middle image there on screen. Now, Emily's Crisp is a brand new brand that was set to launch at the end of March, or beginning of April. So just as the COVID crisis hit the UK, and what Emily's didn't do is say, I don't want to run my campaign anymore. I'm going to take the money back. What she did, and what we worked with her on, is to change the creative. And kind of commit to, if she ran the campaign during this crisis, we would then support another campaign later on in the year. And the creative is brilliant, hopefully you can see it on the screen. It talks about our first ever poster seen by a runner and a pigeon, typical. And just captured, it captured the right tone, it captured the right mood, it didn't turn consumers off. And I just thought it was a brilliant campaign. So we worked really closely with Emily's to kind of ensure that she could continue to run. And then in terms of our long-term partnerships, it's about us kind of making sure that, our agencies know that these are, that when we talk about whether it be sustainability or a charitable cause, we're in it for the long run. And that when I talked about kind of some of the campaigns setting us up as being a blueprint kind of for what we do now, and we had to kind of take a real look at how we name our partners in a way that we can commit to a long-term partnership with them. And that means not just the poster advertising. It means, how is this partnership mutually beneficial? How are you guys, how can you guys help us empower our teams, educate our teams, come into our business and help us understand more about what you do? And how can we support you, whether it be advertising, whether it be that we show up when you guys are running any type of event where we can support too. So really kind of key areas for us in terms of how we're now working with agencies and our approach to that. Next slide, please, Lou. So creating a healthier ad industry, how do we create a healthier ad industry was one of the questions that were put to us. And you'll see here from the nice smiley picture that I talked about earlier is an indication of how we are trying to do that. That is about kind of empowering your people. And this is a picture that shows Cephas Williams, who came into our business after we run his campaign, to talk to our people about why the campaign was so important. And you can see that, you know, everyone in that picture, you know, from our MDs at the front, Richard Bond and Will Ramage, to you know, our day-to-day team. We really enjoyed that session, and from there we did so many things with Cephas, but that's a whole nother presentation. But let's start from the top. Commit to your purpose. Know what your purpose is. Stick to it, but be agile. You know, we've all had to be really flexible in our approach over this period, and I think, you know, being able to flex that purpose is really important. Be authentic in that, you know, so know what your superpower is. Our superpower is that we are an out-of-home business. We have posters up and down the country that can start debates, that can change opinions. So we have a responsibility to be authentic in the campaigns that we run, or that we choose to run with. Partner with experts. You know, we don't know it all, and you know, not every business is set up to have all of those experts that you are when you're trying to run new initiatives. So bring them in. And lastly is empower your people. Next slide, please, Lou. And so we're ending now on a short video that you'll see kind of running as I speak, of some of the named partners for Clear Channel this year, and some of the events that we have run across the last year. And we are really proud. We're really proud because we have gone beyond purpose, beyond profit. We have really thought about at what our responsibility is as a media owner, and how we can do both, essentially be a platform for brands and a platform for good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Caroline, Louise. We are just out of time for questions. So we're going to link through to, and thank you so much, though, it's been very clear. And what I want to say to everybody is, like, the discussions that we've had, it's been absolutely clear in this, that this has benefited Clear Channel's business, both in the short term and in the long term. That would have been my question to elaborate a bit on, but we'll move on now to Ed Latham from Pucker, who's going to give us the viewpoint from the brand side. So thanks very much. Again, Ed, let's see your screen, and looking forward to what you have to say to us.
Great, thank you very much for having me here today, everyone. I'm just sharing my screen. Let me know when you are able to see it, please. Okay, got you. Great, so look, thank you very much for having me here. So I'm Ed, I live in London. I'm a bit of a houseplant enthusiast. You can only see one of them here today. And I am coming to you as a Pucker life lead. So here is my business card. I unfortunately don't get to meet you in person today, but I'm responsible for looking after Pucker Herb's marketing execution in the UK. I have P&L responsibility as a result as well for the UK, and also I look after our global communications function and global communications team. Pucker is a very deeply purposeful and sustainable business. So hopefully some of the examples which we'll have to share with you today will be interesting and relevant. For those of you that don't know us, so Pucker Herbs is a herbal wellbeing company. We're best known for our organic teas that we make. And we are also the fastest growing tea company in the UK, and have been for around the last 5 years. So what I am sharing with you as well is performing for us in the long term, and therefore hopefully is some relevant and useful examples. Way back when, so 19 years ago, as Tim Westwell and Sebastian Pohl, who you can see on the screen just here, our two founders began the company. Sebastian sat in the wheelbarrow in his garden there, is a herbalist by nature, and Tim Westwell is really passionate as well about the possibility that we can change our food systems for the better through organic farming. They came together and began to craft the beautiful business that is Pukka. We describe our purpose as we nurture healthier, happier lives through powerful organic plants. As part of the founding principles that went into the company, but also as part of the key framework that we apply to look at pretty much everything we do. We have this purpose and these values really at the heart of the company. And we also actually talk about having a mission. So our purpose is our why we exist, and our mission is how we go about doing that. So we say that our herbal creations are crafted to connect as many people as possible to the beauty and power of nature. We share our knowledge and campaign for a healthier world, always trying to lead by example. Some of the obvious examples of where our purpose comes into what we do is probably in our physical product and some of our certifications. So for example, Pukka is organic. We have fair trade with certification by Fair for Life, which is a more a higher quality certification than fair trade, in my opinion. We have also Fed Wild certified, in ensuring that the wild crops that we source as well are fairly sourced. We are a certified B Corp, and we also have a 1% for the planet agreement. So as founded by Yvonne Chenard, the Patagonia founder, we are also a company that gives 1% of turnover to environmental causes. And we also have our science-based targets to do our bit to try and help limit climate change to 1.5 degrees or less. So we've got plenty of really practical, tangible examples that we can point to. But I think from a publisher perspective, there's probably some others which are a bit more relevant. And really, the reason that we do this is because we want to think of ourselves and we want to be a force for good in the world. And we're seeking to do more than just pure philanthropy. Earlier this week, a member of my team shared this lovely slide with me, which I'm not expecting you to read by any means. But it was interesting to think of looking at purpose in these 4 boxes. So number 1, there is risk management, doing just what is crisis management or avoiding the horrible things that can come at companies. There's corporate philanthropy, a step on from that, trying to do what's right in a giving back perspective. But then at Pukka, we really try to think about value creation, how business can be a force for good through being socially and environmentally responsible, and also stepping on to look at how we can change the system. And I think today, and the purpose of this connection is really to look at that. How can we begin to change the system of advertising? One pretty clumsy mechanic that we use to ensure that our marketing euros, pounds, and dollars are purposefully invested is through our long-term relationship and strategic partnership that we have with the Eden Project. Hopefully you can now recognize what the photo is. The Eden Project, if you haven't been, is beautiful. When they open back up, I highly encourage you to pay them a visit down in sunny Cornwall. And we work with them effectively as a media partner. They have between 800,000 and 1 million people visiting them each year. And they are ideologically, philosophically aligned with us at Pukka, and we love their work. Their audience is therefore valuable for us, and having the opportunity to speak to them and sample to them as we do as part of our strategic partnership, we think is a great way for us to invest our marketing pounds. As part of that, we have a beautiful little sampling station all made of reclaimed timber, where we also have staff who can share and teach people about the powerful organic plants, which we use as part of our, all of our herbal creations. Another example which might be interesting or relevant again is our recent foray into retail. So Pucker launched a pop-up store for 3 months at the end of 2019 and running into early 2020 in Covent Garden in London. Everything in the store was made from reusable or existing assets that we already had. And we ensured that we were as closed loop as we possibly could be. We're Fair for Life certified, as I think I mentioned, and therefore everyone was paid above the living wage who worked there. And you can hopefully see the quite beautiful little vines, as we call them, the plants growing up the windows. Because vinyls are not very good for the planet, we make sure that when we have moments like branding windows, that we paint them. It's easy to clean off, it's no waste, and we can use eco-friendly paints. With that example, I'm just trying to say that it's important for us to really be authentic down to the details. So where does this direction and where do these values come from? We mentioned Tim and Seb, so Sebastian's on the left there and Tim's just here in the red jumper on the right. And they definitely do provide a lot of the basis, and did provide a lot of the basis for the founding principles of the company. But now what's even greater than having two people who are valued and highly principled as well is that we here in the middle visual, this is our Pucker family coming together a few years back. And like attracts like in many ways, and we have attracted and recruit people who are passionate, purposeful, and who want to make a positive impact on the world. So a lot of it is now culturally embedded in terms of our purpose. Another addition to that is that it's not just us that hold ourselves to account. It's not internal anymore, because as Pucker we have a public face. And this image on the right is showing some of the people who are our shoppers, our buyers. Those people in the community that know about Pucker's values are very clear that it is not acceptable for those to change. And equally, they hold us to account and will let us know if and when we ever get it wrong. Another impact on my marketing decisions is what are the messages that I want to share with the broader world. And here in this picture, you can see the lovely Holly. Holly is a member of the Pucker Herbal team, and she herself is a trained nutritionist. Earlier this year, we decided that to be producing content that was useful, helpful, and not just traditional disruptive advertising, we wanted to put together a series of videos with helpful, informative content, which shared useful information with our audience about herbs, about well-being. And that came to create some of our, well, in fact, the best performing content that we have ever produced, because it was the most relevant for our audience. It had the best reach, view-through rates. I had my lowest CPM, but it was interesting that we didn't go into that discussion. We were trying to design for channel and design social first assets, but my brief to the team was not, how can you make sure that you smash all of your KPIs? The brief to the team was, how can we bring our herbal wisdom into our communications? And it just so turned out that in doing that, we realized and unlocked a little bit of a secret formula. This for me is the long established and well-known principle of advertorial. We're creating native content. We're creating content which is useful and interesting for the audience. So I guess one of my questions for what we can do as the ad industry as well is explore how to change that paradigm that our job is to disrupt. Let's disrupt less and let's help more. And let's try and design things with more of a user-first experience, because those are the questions that I'm asking myself as a marketing manager in my company and speaking to my global teams. And it would be fantastic to have more publishers along that journey with us. The next piece I wanted to address was this conversation about cultural change. I think we're aware that the world is pretty anxious and worried about what's happening right now and what's going to happen in the future. We're looking into a likely economic recession, and there is more content than any human could ever consume ever in their lifetime. I read yesterday that there are 300 hours of YouTube videos uploaded every single minute. So the need for us to cut through and still be interesting and relevant is greater than ever. On top of that, people now expect companies and brands to step up and to be responsible for helping make social change happen, as distrust in and disappointment in governments has further increased. So as all of this comes together as well, we are seeing, as we've had earlier today, a growing awareness of prejudice and systemic racism, as well as other systemic forms of prejudice as well. And on top of that, climate breakdown. So what for me this means that we really need to do, and what it means for us in advertising, is number one, an increased need for honesty and transparency. People don't have much respect in the social world for companies that aren't human, that aren't humble. And I just wanted to share with you an experience that we've had in the last couple of weeks around, for me, what good looks like in terms of humility and a readiness to learn. At Pucker, we decided that we would sponsor the Happy Place Festival that Fern Cotton and her team were putting together. It's a beautiful concept when in a difficult time trying to create a festival when most festivals have been put on pause, to create a positive and safe space where people can share. One video caused offense and provoked questions about cultural appropriation, and the response to that I thought was really enlightening. So if you look in the top middle box here, you can see that Fern Cotton herself, as part of the Happiness Festival, rather than ignoring or trying to hide away from these questions and from something that she was quite honest she didn't know very much about, she decided to include within the program a 35-minute video interviewing and engaging with one of the key people that had called it out on social media. So what I'm saying here is, let's look for ways to learn together, to be humble, and really listen and include the community that we are part of. As part of this, we need to be, as brands, and I speak now as a client, I need to be really discerning about who I entrust my brand with. Because there is a perception, and this example proved it as well, that whichever company I advertise with, I'm endorsing their work. Right now, I'm sure people are aware of the Stop Hate for Profit campaign, which has largely built from the Black Lives Matter movement. The Stop Hate for Profit campaign is calling on companies to take a pause on Facebook and Instagram advertising during the month of July, because we want to make Facebook and social media a fairer, more inclusive place, and to make it much harder for the proliferation of hatred, hate speech, and incitement to radicalism. There's a lot to be learned from this, and companies now and people now are looking and receiving messages which we may not be intending to send, but we definitely are. And it's not just about saying the right thing. As there's a lot of content on social media and as part of the Black Lives Matter movement, this cannot just be performative action. We are individuals and people, and just like the vines on my windows, which I'm painting because I don't want there to be an increased environmental impact, also we need to be sure that when we're speaking out about issues, particularly around issues around prejudice and structural racism, that we are doing it in a way which is aligned with our values and true to what we represent as a company. So what can companies do? You can be a B Corp. We at Pucker are a B Corp. B Corp is a wonderful organization and a really charming network of, for the most part, very friendly, lovely companies. So I highly recommend you take a look at it. Guardian, as people may know, is a publisher which is a B Corp and therefore has defined as part of its company mission to be a force for good in the world. I'd also invite all of us to say, how can I, as an individual, as a person, as a manager, working in a business, look to live my values and bring those to life? What decisions can I personally make? And to finish, there was a question of how can we make a healthier ad industry? Yes, we can. And yes, we must. It's surely what we want to leave as our legacy in the world. So how can we create progress? Well, look, first of all, today I think is a fantastic start because we're starting the conversation and we're starting to co-create and learn together. So please engage me and brands like me, engage the B Corp community in talking about how we can create a positive, effective change in the ad industry. Let's make this conversation happen. And if the community of publishers that I hope I'm speaking to today can't make that happen, I don't know who can. We're an incredibly powerful and privileged group in that respect. And let's define what the vision is to make it happen. Because conversation is great, but by itself, it won't take you to action. And I would love to experiment and test some things with you to look at how we can make advertising a better and bigger force for good in the world. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ed. Ed, I want you to know, and I want the audience in today to know that AOP is using this event and this discussion as a guide to how we should move forward with the industry. So we have plans ahead that are guided by this discussion and the research that we've done that leads to, we hope, meaningful change for the better for the industry and you know and for the effect that that has into the world as well. So I'd like to thank you very much for your suggestions. I would ask you questions, but we're running slightly behind. And so I just want to thank you so much for your contribution. And now to invite Amy from Goodloot to take our panel. We'll also have on that panel Chris from Brand Advance, Laura from Essence, and Dino from Barbershop. So everybody enjoy that discussion and thanks so far to all the contributors. So I should just say, actually, just to reiterate the questions that we're asking, although I think it should be reasonably clear from the kinds of things that have come back from the presenters so far. We're asking, how is the movement towards purpose beyond profit affecting the CMO, the agency, the media? We've seen some of that so far. Tell us more about the cultural change. We've seen some great stuff there. Hi, Chris. Tell us a little bit about long-term and short-term opportunities. I know that's a lot of questions, and we're never going to answer all these questions in full, right? We're using this as a platform to give ourselves direction to start with, if you like, and along hopefully will be a really productive road for us in the upcoming months. Final point, what should publishers, AOP, and the industry do about it? We had some good suggestions. We're taking that all on board.
Do we know anything about, have we worked with Pepsi?
Hi Chris, how are you?
Yeah, good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, got you.
Yeah.
The rest of the panel to come online.
I think I could see them.
Oh, okay.
yeah, they're all here.
I'll shut up and I'll let it take it away.
Great. Should we kick off then?
Yep.
All right, let's do this. The AOP and did it for after this session. My name is Amy. I'll be the moderator. I'm the founder and CEO of Goodloot. So we're an ethical advertising platform. We distribute ads across the internet, and when people engage with those ads, we fund a donation to a relevant social cause. And I'm thrilled to be joined by my panelists today. I'll let you guys introduce yourself, and then we'll kick off the discussion.
Shall I go first? Yeah. I'm Chris Kenner. I'm the CEO at Brand Advance. So we help brands reach diversity where diversity lives, I suppose. So help brands to reach diversity, sort of black in black media, LGBT in LGBT media, etc., etc. Dino.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Hi, yeah, Dino Miles-Lamptey. I'm the founder of The Barbershop. So we're a strategic-led creative company. We work with brands that are purpose-led, but also purpose-seeking. And we like to bring together creativity across, media, creative, and technology.
I'll jump in next. Hello, I'm Laura Wade. I'm VP of Content and Innovation at Essence. For those of you that don't know, Essence pioneers the use of data science and machine learning to make brands more valuable to the world. That's our purpose, our proposition, and I sit within the content team.
All right. So I think the overall discussion we want to have today is, has the world got kinder, and what does that mean for our industry? So, collectively, we have experienced a global crisis. We've been locked in our homes, united with our communities, and then we watch on our screens as awful things happen to Black people in the US, and that ignites a conversation and starts this Black Lives Matter movement in a way it's never been globally picked up before. And then we put Facebook under the microscope and we start thinking about our media dollars and how the industry has a role to play. And all of this has happened within 4 months. So it feels like we've had an existential crisis in our industry, and I want to deal with that in 2 parts. So first, I'd love to hear from the panel how that has affected consumers, our behavior, our beliefs, our attitudes, and then let's explore how that's affected brands and the expectations we place on them. So let's start with consumers first, and if anyone wants to jump in with some thoughts.
Yeah, I can jump in. So, just because I'm gobby. I think, do you know what, 3 months ago, bus driver, black bus driver was called a low paid worker. The, Indian lady that worked in Tesco's was called a low skilled worker. Skip forward 3 months, they're all called key workers. We clap them all in the street. We stand on our balconies and say, well done and thank you. I think that is the mind change. Low paid, low skilled is now key. Key, the very word, changes your way of thinking. All governments are trying to now speak to their key workers. All brands are now trying to speak to their key workers. And that's seeing a sea of change of how we look at the bus driver, how we look at the street cleaner, how we look at the Tesco's worker, how we look at race. Because let's be honest, it's not, Black people haven't got a gene that meant that they caught corona faster, but they were dying at a rate of 2 to 1. And that was because they were these key workers. They predominantly were in places where people were breathing on them, they were helping people, they were in hospitals, etc. So yeah, I think that's, for me, that's been the massive mind shift. It's just changed our way of thinking.
I think I'd build on that. 100% agree. A lot of my family are workers, so seeing it firsthand and the impact of it. I think it's less about kindness. I think kindness has always existed in society. Those people were kind people before this happened. They were key workers doing their jobs. I think the change really has come from, I think it's given us a time to reflect. It's slowed life down a bit, and I think it's actually started to make people realise, those of us that are in a position of privilege, about accountability. I think people were very much in their lanes, living their lives at the pace to deliver everything, and now we've had to stop and reflect. And I think what COVID has done is shone a light on social inequality, social injustice, and not only shone a light on it, but made people realise, actually, this is my community. And rather than being a bystander, I need to step up and show up and be an ally or make my voice heard. And I think that's a change that we're seeing of people, sort of that active participation and active realisation of privilege. And I wouldn't say that's not necessarily true, because there's obviously other people there that have been massively negatively impacted and are probably just fighting to survive. But I think those of us that are in privilege have realised we need to be more active.
Yeah, I mean, I would add that I think the jury is slightly still out, though, in terms of how much change is really happening, because you know, for us to really know this change, we've got to have evidence of change. And I think that while there's been a lot of you know, conscious awareness been focused in, you know, in the right direction, and without a doubt, I think the moment of COVID, people being locked down at home, has allowed for a bit more time to think about some of the issues. So almost the fortunate thing about the Black Lives Matter kind of movement is that it actually gave people, it came at a time when people could actually sit there and not just suddenly change the channel and start looking at, you know, the next thing that was entertaining on TV. But I think that, you know, what it's make people realize is they want to kind of like be involved in making the change, and they have a responsibility for it. But the reason why I say the jury is still out is because, you know, there is awareness and there is action and there's accountability. And until we really know, you know, the facts and the figures of what's changing, you know, we can't really confidently say that behaviors have changed or opinions have changed. And I think that actually, in terms of when we look at things like, you know, consumer behavior, in terms of even the conscious consumer, in terms of how they spend their money, I think the challenge at the moment is that actually, because of lockdown and the situation that we're in, you know, the businesses that are maybe doing the right thing have been struggling, you know, and actually, you know, what we're probably seeing right now is actually consumers retrenching to the reliable Amazons of this world and things like that, for example, just to get what they need. And actually, I think when we come out of this lockdown period, we'll find that the bigger, larger companies that probably haven't necessarily been playing to the agenda of the consumer in terms of purpose first, have probably gained more share.
100%. And I think that I 100% agree with Dino. And I think that what we're seeing though, in terms of, there's always loads of surveys in our industry, isn't there? But there seems to be a sense coming through that people don't want to go back to how it was before. So I think, again, that's our responsibility as a media industry, is how do we help people achieve what they want to achieve rather than fall back into the habits and the convenient and the lifestyle that doesn't necessarily match their values anymore. I think that's the challenge we face.
Yeah, and so I mean, I found an interesting study around this. So PFS obviously found a study that confirms my point of view, but they were looking at shifts in loyalty and shifts in consumer behaviour, and you know, they found, I think it's 52% had a greater loyalty to brands that had been kind to their workers during this time, and so there are little pieces of evidence where purchase is shifting. So I guess that's quite a nice segue to then think about all of these shifts in society and how we've changed as people. How does that reflect for brands, and how are brands reacting to that added accountability and responsibility?
I just add to that as well. I mean, there've been some great things that have come about, you know, during the COVID period. Like there's a great site called didtheyhelp.com, which again focused on exactly the changes that their companies have made, how they're treated their workers. You know, I think that, you know, in this whole space, there's always been some great initiatives around, like, you know, things like the Sunday Times Best 100 Companies. There's always been a great initiative that concentrated on well-being and engagement and staff. But I think they've always been quite, you know, focused on the companies that put their hat in a ring, in a sense, and chose to be involved in that. I think what was talked about earlier on, that was talked about by Pucker in terms of the B Corp situation. I think, you know, B Corp have been blooming in this period in terms of more people going, right, how can we start that journey? I think that's a great thing, because B Corp isn't an easy thing to achieve. It's a very, very complicated thing, which you know, ensures that companies are doing the right thing, but also making sure their supply lines are doing the right thing as well, and you know, and putting pressure all along the chain. So I think that there are some great changes. And also the other thing as well is in terms of the city and the finance, you know, the economics of it all is probably the most important thing. And now we're seeing a rise in funding and investment happening to ESG companies, the companies that do put the environment, social and governance first. And I think that's something that's going to keep on growing. And as a result, people will be focusing on it a lot more, because it's money and it's investment.
Yeah, actually on that point, we Good Loop certified as a B Corp earlier last year. And it really impacted our investment conversations. We have impact investors in the business because of our B Corp status.
Great.
I just showcased my growth.
I think Dilip's on still on not on mute.
Little insight into his. We might hear his kids having breakfast or something. So how about the brands that you guys work with? Yeah, let's think about how they're reacting.
No, it's good.
Have you found any good examples of brands doing this well and responding well at this time?
A lot of brands, well, spend on within diverse publications has shot up. You know, it shot up through COVID, about 400%, I think. But now it's continuing to rise because of the Facebook boycott, where brands and their agencies are saying, okay, we're not going to stick our money here. So let's do something we haven't done before with a little bit more focus. I mean, I have obviously my commercial head is, we would love to help you reach them. These demographics. My commercial head for Brand Advance, my commercial head for the actual publications that deserve this money, because they, you know, their voices are going to be needed more and more throughout this year and next year. We've got an election where the leader of the free world is the Antichrist. So people are going to need to stand up and speak, you know, speak for my gayness, speak for my blackness, speak up for, just going to need to speak and shout a lot. So they're going to need, you know, to keep these publications. So I'm happy with that. I am going to throw it back out though, that it's 2020. I've been black for 37 years. I've been gay for 37 years, but didn't come out till I was 26. So a little bit shorter time on that, I'll give them. But why now? Because they've got a bit of money left over from Facebook. Are we saying, oh, so let's stick it into reaching black people? Well, we were always there. You know, now that there's a boycott, you know, wouldn't you have decided that when you stuck the black square on your social media and said, I stand shoulder to shoulder? Wouldn't that be the point? If you were going to make this choice, you know, it's just sometimes I get what, you know, saying, you know, is it real? It's happening, and spend is happening, and agencies are working on behalf of their clients to push that spend. Agencies like Essence that are working, you know, to push that spend and to advise the clients, etc. But yeah, I don't want to pat everyone on the back and say well done and thank you for giving me a quid. You know, like, I was always there. My money was always there, and all of a sudden in 2020 the world has woke at the same time, and it took a pandemic to get us there, you know.
Yeah, and I think I can echo that, and I think what we need to be mindful of is, and I can only speak on behalf of Essence, like I'm not speaking on behalf of our clients, I'm speaking as an Essence representative, is that we are really keen that it's not about just reacting. You know, we had, I think for us, you know, this is my personal view, we had initiatives within our business already looking at diversity and looking at sort of Black Lives Matter, and we have it for the environmental initiatives that we had, and they were always important. But I think now it's about going back to the investor point of view, they're becoming business critical, and that's the step change. And no matter what way we cut it and talk about purpose, it's the financial sector that is driving this. It's the Task Force for Climate Disclosure. It is the B Corp. It's the financial sector is probably one of the driving components that will mean that we either hit our 1.5% or exceed it, just based on investment and corporations and success. So, you know, that I feel like these issues have always been there, and I think it's really important as individuals and as companies that we accelerate what we're doing, and we put the right path of progress in place. It's not about just reacting and jumping on a headline or what's in the news cycle, and that we're working behind the scenes to get our house in order even more so, and reaching out to experts to help us do that. But it's a continual process. And that's where, you know, that purpose comes in, but I think it's more about progress. Because, you know, dare I say, diversity and inclusion isn't about purpose. that shouldn't be a purpose, that should be a given. And that's, you know, we need to be mindful of that as well.
I think just on the point of purpose and, you know, let's say people, I think that, you know, what was also quite nice about the Parker presentation, which was about, you know, their purpose was about this, you know, healthier and happier lives, which I think that the mistake that I think that some people have made in defining their purpose is when they don't have people at the heart of it. Because I think that it's easy to come up with a purpose that is, you know, probably about the environment and things like that, and you almost lose sight of the fact that actually, well, people are the main purpose at the end of the day. You know, you want a better environment so people can live better lives, and I think that you know, the brands that have found it easier to navigate themselves through, you know, whatever crisis you look at in terms of whether it was the pandemic or the Black Lives Matter or everything that was going on there, had people at the heart of their purpose. So actually making those decisions about, you know, the humanity-based decisions weren't that difficult. I mean, often, you know, I had brands that were saying things like, oh, but we don't do politics, or you'd read about brands that go, oh, it's political. And it's actually, well, it's not political, is it? It's about people and humanity and justice, which, you know, yes, is, you know, it crosses in terms of politics, but it crosses everything. And actually, I think that the one thing I would say, which is really important, and hopefully people are becoming a bit more enlightened to, is that there's a circle of accountability that's needed here. You know, so it's, you know, previously everyone says, okay, the consumers, you know, it's about consumers making the movements and doing the acts and choosing not to buy or what to buy. But actually, it's great when the brands get involved and lead the way and kind of like go, actually, well, we're not going to operate in this space if we don't, you know, this doesn't comply by our values. And they get together as a collective and become even bigger and stronger with that voice. And secondly, I think that's where agencies have a big role as well. Because in the past, you know, agencies have sat there and gone, okay, well, it's up to the client to say whether they want to advertise on Facebook or not. But I think that, you know, when you look at things in terms of a circle of accountability, you go, well, we've got a role to play in advising the client about where they should be advertising and where they shouldn't be. You know, there's great things like the Conscious Advertiser Network, you know, which, you know, I don't think enough agencies talk about with their clients and say, look, you know, actually, you know, there is a way of operating here. There's a non-for-profit organization out here that can cleanse your, you know, your advertising kind of profile and portfolio. And similarly, I think that, you know, it's not just about, you know, brands, advertisers, consumers, but the other elements of our industry as well. And I think that's what the values of B Corp is really good in that, in terms of going to your supply line, you know, making sure that everyone that you're working with is doing the right thing and has the same shared kind of values and principles. So I think that circle of accountability is what we should all be thinking about now, thinking about, you know, who we work with, recruiters, you know, intermediaries, all the suppliers, making sure that they're living up to the values and the purposes that we have as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love that point actually, because it really comes back to what Chris was saying around why now, right? Because I think we've been waiting for someone to take the lead on it. You know, all the brands have been saying, well, we wait for consumers, and consumers are going, well, we don't have any power or choice to like you mentioned, you know, like we have to use Amazon because we have to use Amazon. So there's this real sort of passing the buck sense, and then suddenly consumers have started demanding it, starting asking meaningful questions, and then brands have had to look internally. And so it's kind of, if we can, this would be a great opportunity to shift that and to start taking responsibility as an industry to drive it forwards rather than react to consumers. So I'd love to kind of, on that point, I'd love to talk a bit about the business opportunity here. So how do we, because ultimately that's what this is all about, right? We're here to sell soap or whatever. So or tea. So how do we use this cultural shift to make our brands more successful, to create competitive advantage?
Sorry, I keep having to mute because I think I've got loads of background noise, but we've just realized that literally in 12 to 24 hours, we can pretty much change everything we've ever known. Everything, you know, ways of working, ways of living, well, seeing our family every Sunday. Now we're not going to, you know, getting away from the kids because they go to work. Now we're stuck with them and the other halves. Just everything, you know, and everybody did it. Everybody did it, you know. It's been harder for some than others, but we all did it. We all, you know, made that change. That is the opportunity. The very fact that we know that we can change everything in 12 to 24 hours. So, you know, the old excuses for big corporations of, you know, we're a slow moving ship and to change takes time and we've got a 3 to 5 year plan. Well, you were work from the office. You had a beautiful office and I don't know, on South Bank, and you made everybody be in there for 9 o'clock, and all of a sudden they could all do the exact same job, you know, from the four corners of the UK. So I think that's the opportunity. There's obviously lots of other opportunities to drill down into. I think there's opportunities for spend to be more purposeful, like it's mentioned, like Dino's mentioned. I know I'm plugging you, Amy, but like Good Loop, and I'll plug myself, like brand advance and reaching diverse audiences. You know, everything. We now know we can shift our mindsets, and our companies and our consumers will follow. So that for me is the opportunity. You know, I think there's so much opportunity. I'm an optimist. I know, Dino, you were saying that you don't know whether it's going to stay. I think it is. You know, I am empowered enough to, I'm not going to shut up now. And as long as they keep putting me on panels like this, or, you know, in the press or whatever, I am going to stop, because now I've seen the light. Now I know that it doesn't have to be this way just because it always has. Words like blacklist and whitelist in our industry, gone, you know, like literally we just feel empowered to say, do you know what? Why is black bad and white's good? You know, we're just changing things that have always been, and we're saying no more. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. I'm excited for it. You know.
So there's your challenge, Dino. Let's hear the pessimist point of view.
I wouldn't say I'm a pessimist. I'll say I'm also an optimist, but a little bit more realist in terms of, until we have the data and the tracking, then we don't really know where we're at or how well we're progressing. So, you know, I think that actually, you know, things will change almost by force, in a sense. You know, when we talk about things like diversity, for example, you know, right now we're still having, you know, debates and questions about things like the ethnicity pay gap, which is something that our industry holds this information for, but doesn't publish. You know, so the IPA, you know, diversity census publishes the gender pay gap, but it doesn't do the ethnicity pay gap. So, you know, if you want to right the wrongs, then you just, you know, start to release the information, and then we can all progress towards, you know, making things more equal. So, you know, for me, it's about, well, you know, if there's information that exists already that is definitely going to be helpful for improving the situation, then I don't see why that's been held back. If people are, you know, are aligned to the same strategic objective of you know, of eradicating this kind of like, you know, systematic problems. I mean, what I would say in terms of about, you know, how brands can, you know, take advantage of this situation. You know, one of the things that we've got to be really careful of is this kind of like, you know, ethical washing, you know, in terms of, you know, people just jumping on board, saying they're doing something, and, you know, convincing the consumers that they're doing something when they're not necessarily doing things in the best possible form. And that's a real kind of conscious thing. So I think that, you know, as a brand, the first thing is you've got to get your own house in order. You've got to make sure that, you know, you're compliant to the high levels and high standards that you claim to be, you know, reporting to. And I think that the fundamental things about that are about using data and being very transparent about what you're doing, and providing equity in your company. So, you know, you've got to publish your figures. You've got to say, okay, this is what our, you know, let's talk about from a marketing department. This is what our marketing department looks like. You know, and then this is what our whole organization looks like. You know, this is what our leadership looks like. This is the representation at the top table. And, you know, and if you haven't got the right representation, then you start to look to things like non-exec directors. You know, in 3 weeks, you could get someone there that can be outside of your industry, that can input and provide that kind of like, you know, slightly more balanced kind of view in your company as you work slowly to make it more organic throughout your company. And then I think that in terms of, you've also then got to look at you as a brand and put pressure on your agencies to be a little bit more responsible about how you communicate. You've got to look at the advertising that you do as being an influential part of the world. You know, advertising it influences people and persuades people. So then that's the connection to the consumers in terms of what you say and how you say it in your advertising can shift the dial and can make people feel differently and make them feel like they've got more support behind their own values and messages. And that's about, you know, who you trade with, how you trade, the expectations that you set with them. But I also think that in terms of, you want effective advertising, you want advertising that works. That's the main purpose. You want to sell product as well. So it is about, in terms of as an industry and publishers, for example, you know, they need to get smarter about having propositions that are truly effective rather than just statistically, you know, like large volume, low cost, for example, which I think is where the problem of the industry has been for far too long. You know, we've got a problem in the programmatic space of just, you know, inventory that is trash. And we've got a problem in the space where people are not calling out the differences between quality publisher content and just a load of trash content, because the metrics aren't there in terms of universal metrics aren't there to say that, no, this is the stuff that we're really prepared to pay for, and this is the stuff that we're not. And also the education of the consumer in terms of where the quality is and what the things are that where they should be spending their time isn't really there right now. The things they should be prepared to pay for isn't really there. So there's a lot more to do in terms of adding the value into the market for the advertisers and the brands that choose to take a more purpose-driven, ethical standing point.
Laura, how has it affected the agency world?
Like I said before, we had quite a lot of initiatives already in place. So if you go back to the Cannes position in terms of child wellbeing, we work with Super Awesome. So if people don't know Super Awesome, check them out. They're all about ad tech for children, building that into your ad tech as a publisher, as a brand, as an agency. We'd already signed up to the Paradigm for Parity initiative, and obviously I think that's been accelerated. For us, I think it's taken a harder look at the space that we play in, because fundamentally, as marketeers and as media planners and buyers, and as a content team, our business is based on generalizations. we generalize consumers, and I think it's kind of now it's taken a stance more of being, if you talk about diversity, it's more about looking at and inclusion, sort of being proactively, intentionally inclusive rather than unintentionally inclusive. And that goes from the content that you're producing to the people that you're working with. I think also, again, from a content perspective, having a lens to look at what we're producing in terms of, say, the environment. How do we decouple aspirational lifestyles with carbon heavy behaviours? Because we're on a ticking timeline when it comes for environmental impact, which again is aligned with social justice and social impact. It's all one big cycle. So we need to start thinking about our bigger impact beyond return on investment, which I think is everyone's point here. But how we do that as individuals is really important. It needs to be authentic, and it also needs to be led from the heart of a business, whether it's an agency, whether it's a brand, whether it's a publisher. It can't just be a sideline initiative or a group of people that are championing. It has to be authentic, it has to be consistent, and it has to be embedded within your business. And I think that's what we are looking at now in terms of how we accelerate the initiatives, how we create more proof points, and how we give ourselves harder targets as well to deliver that. And be more public about it rather than doing it behind closed doors, because we want to attract the right talent. We talk about, it's not about cultural fit anymore, it's about cultural ad. Like just little nuances where you try and address all of those, and off the back of that, we will do better work for our clients, and we'll have better conversations with publishers, which will hopefully then create this cycle, as Dino says, of stronger, more effective communication that also is valuable to society at large.
So I just wanted to add something, Amy, if that's okay, just to make it very relevant to a couple of things that have been mentioned already in terms of the stop hate for profit, and also in terms of the publishers that are probably sitting there viewing this. I think what's really interesting, what I've noticed as well with some of the brands that we work with that have signed up to stop hate for profit, is when they follow that with the question of what's the alternative, where do they put their money if they're not putting it in Facebook and Instagram. And I think that's the real live reality and the challenge that publishers have to answer. And when we talk about it in terms of from a purpose-driven business sense, and I say specifically because it's very easy to target people that have slightly more kind of ethical leaning values through Facebook and Instagram in terms of the tool, the system, the data allows you to be much more specific in that sense. It's quite easy to identify those people. But if you move that into other platforms, and you start to think about that in other environments, in the publishing environments, is the richness of the data there to actually find sizable audiences like that? I don't think that every brand is aware of that, and it's that easy for people. So I think that's a really important point. It's we need to work in a bit more of a collaborative form, but publishers need to get together to provide that kind of data that can compete on the same level, that first party data that compete on the richness as the Facebook is providing right now. And I think that's the real kind of missing gap for an ethical kind of purpose-led brand. You need alternatives. but those alternatives need to be easy to use and very effective.
I would like to just quickly add as well, though, I don't think hate speech is exclusive to one platform, or I think we need to also be mindful in terms of the whole digital ecosystem, but also the non-digital ecosystem as well. There's a lot of rhetoric out there that doesn't just exist in the digital world, and I think what we need to be aware of is that is a reflection of issues in society that we need to address, and advertising and brands have a role within that as well.
And I think that's a really nice place to end, actually, because it's a real call to action for the publishers who are listening. You're thinking, the clues in the name of the conscious ad network. Brands need to choose their media more consciously and think about what their media is funding. So publishers have a massive opportunity here, a business opportunity and an opportunity to make the world a better place. So thank you so much for joining me today. I'll hand back over to Dylan.
Thanks so much, Amy, and to the panel as well. I hope that everyone feels they've learnt something interesting today, and also understood that there are some useful ways forward for us. Look at what we can do for our businesses on a day-to-day basis, and also what we can do for the industry on a long-term basis. AOP definitely is going to be following up on all of that. So I just want to say thank you again so much to everybody that's participated, and to you, the audience, as well. And we will see you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.